Hi, everybody. My name's Rachel Manning. I'm the Film Programs Manager here at the Bullock Museum. Thanks for tuning in, and also thanks to our web and digital and marketing team for their work on these virtual programs. So let's give them a virtual round of applause. Real Women in Film is a series where we focus on the cinematic works of women in front of and behind the camera. And this season, we're taking a look at empowerment, seen through the lens of activism. Tonight we're going to be focusing on the film The Divine Order by writer and director Petra Volpe. You can access a virtual screening of the film by going to our webpage, and you can also access a short film called Tightly Wound by filmmaker Shelby Haddon. She's a local Austin filmmaker. And this is a short film that we're highlighting specifically for this program. If you'd like to learn more about other Bullock Museum programming, you can go to thestoryofTexas.com and follow the conversation at Bullock Museum. And now I'd like to welcome writer and director of The Divine Order, Petra Volpe. Well, welcome, Petra. Thank you so much for being with us virtually for our Real Women in Film series. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm very good. I'm in New York and it's hot, but I'm not complaining. It's a nice day outside.
Right.
Yeah.
It's very hot here
I'm not
too.
complaining yet. Like, ask me in 2 weeks, I will be complaining like everybody else.
Sure. Yeah, we all have sort of an amnesia with the heat.
Yeah.
So I thought we could get started by you just telling everybody a little bit about you, your journey to becoming a writer and director. And one other thing I was kind of thinking about is what's your philosophy as a filmmaker, particularly in today's times? Because it seems like everybody has a different approach to their filmmaking process, and I'm sure our audience would love to hear about that.
Mm. Well, I think I came to filmmaking pretty late because I grew up in a total working class family. My father is an Italian immigrant. He came to Switzerland in the late 60s and he worked in a factory. My mother was the baker's daughter. So I didn't grow up with a lot of like art. We watched movies, we watched a lot of television. That was, my father's favorite pastime because he was always tired from working in the factory. So, but I would never have imagined that this little Italian, little round kid with glasses would ever be a director. It wasn't even in my world that girls could do that. But I early on was interested in, I remember playing with my dolls a lot and inventing little stories for them. And then later, when I was a teenager, I wanted to become a photographer. But even back, like even my generation, I was born 1970. So when I was a teenie, that was 85, they would say, oh, you're a girl, you can't become a photographer because you would have to carry heavy lamps. So there was a lot of like, let's say a lot of prejudices against immigrant kids and girls especially. And so I wasn't really encouraged to do art or express myself or to have a dream to become something different. Like what my parents saw for me was like, you'll become a mom and you'll learn a nice profession, but then you'll have a family and that's that. And but I was, maybe met the right people at the right time. I had a little artistic streak that I followed. It was a silent voice in me that I just followed always. And it was a long journey, but then at 27, I went to film school and studied film, and that was quite a revelation for me because a lot of things that I really love came together, like working with sound, working with images, working with people, inventing and writing stories, like all these things that I really like to do and that give me so much pleasure, I could bundle in this profession of being a director and writer. And now my parents are super proud, but they're like, how the heck did we get a daughter like that? They don't understand. They're like, you must have fallen off the wagon of somebody else. Like, I'm the only artist in the family also, but they're super. So I always encourage, like, I think the ways we become artists, they are so unique and everybody should just try. I always try to encourage when I speak to young people about our profession is like to really follow your dream, like to follow this little voice in your head. that maybe takes you a different path than from what your family taught you. And it will lead you down an interesting way. And it just maybe takes a little longer than kids who maybe were encouraged when they were really young to become artists because they are from artistic families or more, let's say, more educated families. But everybody who has that little voice should listen to it.
Yeah, and it sounds like you stayed pretty motivated through maybe some of what could have been considered insecurities. Was there anything in particular that kept you moving? Like, what was the thing inside of you that kept you going forward?
I think it was very much the need to tell stories. And I think it's maybe from my grandmother, from my Italian grandmother. She used to be very dramatic and very Catholic, and she would dramatize every story she would tell. And maybe a little bit of her is in me, and I always felt the need to tell stories, even also in a social situation. I always wrap everything into a story. And I started to trust this talent. I didn't think it was a talent in the beginning. I didn't even know it was of any use, But and it took many, many years. Like the journey of an artist is a very, very long journey, especially when you come from a place like me, where it's not just there and it's not the root of your your upbringing. You deal with a lot of insecurities. And I would say in the beginning, my biggest handicap was almost myself, that I thought maybe I shouldn't trust this voice, and maybe I had this imposter syndrome. I thought I'm just pretending to be an artist. Maybe I'm not a real artist. Like all these things that go through a young person's mind, they were very strong in the beginning, all these doubts. And in the end, it's just keep working, like keep doing your thing. And then you start to trust what you're creating. And you think, I actually put this thing into the world, my little first film, and then another film. And you just keep learning and evolving as a person and as an artist.
Yeah. Well, so what you just said makes me think about something that you were talking about, telling stories. And it makes me think how you came to this story. What was the driving force behind creating this film about women's right to vote? And, I'm sure a lot of people in the United States may not have known about this journey until they watched your film. So Could you talk a little bit about what sparked that idea?
Well, almost all my films are about women who liberate themselves in some way or another. I made 3 other films before this one that were also about women breaking out, women liberating themselves. And I think it's very much connected to my mother and my grandmothers. It's something I wished for them, that they would break out and take agencies of their lives and be more free and more independent. And they couldn't, So my Italian grandmother, her life was very constrained and very, patriarchy kept her in its claws. But this particular film I worked very closely with my producer, and we always trade ideas back and forth. And we were having, one of these afternoons talking about what movies do we want to make next. And he said, nobody ever made a film about the women's right to vote in Switzerland, and hit me like a thunderbolt. I was like, why the heck did I not come up with that? Of course we need to make a movie about that. This is such a huge part of our history and nobody ever talks about it. So it was really, the idea was sparked by him, but it initiated this whole big journey. I went on, to research a lot and really find, this is just a conceptual idea to make a movie about the women's right to vote. You have no characters, you have no decision of when to set the movie, because this story is over 100 years old. Like, women in Switzerland fought for over 100 years for the right to vote. It's not that they just sat back and waited until they got it. So I also had to choose which period, of this long fight was I going to focus on, and whose perspective is it? And it took many years, like 5 years, for the screenplay to develop to the way it is now.
Did you get a lot of help along the way, or did you do most of the historical research for the film? Or maybe it was a little bit of both?
I did all of the historical research myself. I always do that. I love research, and I just did a huge project about Switzerland after the Second World War, which was also, a lot of research. But then the screenplay always needs a whole family, like a child. For me, like writing a screenplay, I have a few people around me, like my producer is very close, and then there's a few trusted people, and we're raising this baby together. I don't think you can write a screenplay all on your own, because at some point you lack distance, and because you're so deep into the story, and you need the eyes and the love of other people to see this thing you're creating from a little bit further away, and that gives you clarity and makes you see clearer where you have to take it. So I was fortunate, and I'm very fortunate to always work with really great people.
You were kind of actually talking about the dynamics. There's it's a dramatic film. And so I was thinking about the power dynamics that you show within marriage in the film. And I was kind of wondering, with every film, there's something that the writer or the director or both choose that's what they're going to kind of tie the story around. And what made you decide that was what those power dynamics is what you wanted to wrap your story around? And yeah, why did you want that to be your focal point, I guess?
Well, I guess it's around the basic, the fundamental theme of the movie is very much the private is political. And for me, that's very much the truth. It's a universal theme, and it's true yesterday, and it's true today, and it will be true tomorrow. So the way we are with each other in our families and in our relationships very much informs our politics, and vice versa. Politics trickles back into families, and how we relate to each other, and how we are to each other, and how we think of each other. So for me, the family and what she's doing politically is very much linked. How for me, the family is the smallest society in the society. And I think especially for women, you know, the husband you choose and what kind of deal you make with him, you know, like, yeah, it's a deal. Like, we constantly have to make deals with each other. And if you have a husband who is not willing to make a good deal with you about childcare and household and all these things, you will be left going back into the 50s, even today, as a woman. And I've spoken to a lot of women who said their marriage went back into the 50s when they got children. They were very equal, you know, they were modern young couples, they shared household chores, they felt they're very unequal, you know, on equal levels. And the moment the kids were there, even fathers who think they're doing a lot are doing a lot less than the women. And that's work. It's like emotional work, it's intellectual work, it takes away from your actual, you know, going to work. And I think there we're still in a really far away from being equal. Like, I know very few couples who are actually really managing that. And it's something both partners need to want. Like, they have to commit to this and say, we really want to also go against the big stream, because most of the people, they just fall into a pattern they've known from their own parents, even if they don't want to. It's very subconscious. And to not go down that path and to find your very own form as a family and to be truly equal partners, that's a lot of work from both. The man needs to want, the husband needs to want it, and the wife too. So I think women's equality and our battle is very much linked to our private lives, and how can we organize around children and work and all of that. And then, you know, then there's the bigger and the more external battles are the political battles, but they are linked.
I definitely like the way you phrased it, private, political, and honestly, I had never thought of it that way. So you articulated that really well. And yeah, I wanted to shift gears a little bit just into the way fashion is used in the film. And so you worked with Linda Harper. She was your costume designer in the film?
Yes.
And I'm kind of a sucker for period pieces. So what was it like working with Linda and honing in on that 70s bold fashion time period and how it played a role in the film? I mean, it was a character in a lot of ways because it shifted the way she perceived herself in the film, I think.
Yeah, very much. I mean, Linda's work is amazing, and we've worked together many, many times because she is so character oriented. She really she really focuses on the characters very much and tries to figure out who is this person really and how does she dress, or he. And in this movie, it was a particular challenge to find the costumes because, you know, for us, we didn't have a huge budget, and these are historical clothes. So it's, and we don't have, we don't have a Hollywood place where there's all these old beautiful clothes. We had to gather them from all over the places. So she needed a lot of creativity to find these costumes. And with Nora, it was a particular challenge because it was important that she changes, but we didn't want it to be, you know, she had to still stay within her character. Like, we didn't want it to be kind of over the top. So to find that thin line, what do we believe she's capable of? Like, even her wearing a pair of trousers is a huge thing within that world. Nobody was wearing trousers in this time in Swiss villages. But how hippie-esque can her t-shirt be? Like, what would she like? What would a woman like Nora, who dresses this way in the beginning, how daring would she be? How far would she go with her change? So we talked a lot about that, like how subtle can this change be, but still clear. Like, it had to be subtle, it had to be truthful within the world of Nora, but it also had to be very visible and clear. And that's always a tricky thing. And I think, Linda ultimately found the perfect pieces with her yellow shirt and the trousers, and we made it a part of the scene, actually, and, you know, with the grandfather commenting on it, and also with her hair. Like, the hair was also very important because all the women had the hair up, you know, they had updos. And not having that was a huge thing, you know, and everybody in the village would notice a thing like that. Because social control in Switzerland is also very, especially in these little villages, everybody's watching everybody and commenting everybody and monitoring what are they doing, are they changing, and the movie is also very much about, you know, people hating change. Like, it's about not wanting the world to change, fear of change.
Did you have entire, like, character dossiers where you broke down those things? Like, where you wrote out all of the information about Nora and how she would change and when she would change? I'm so intrigued by those details that filmmakers come up with.
Yeah, I mean, it was very clear that the scene in the hairdresser is a big scene, that the scene, her putting on her t-shirt for the first time and these pants, is a big thing. So those were really part of her transformation. And they were part of the script very much. And also for the other characters, they're all changed subtly. You know, we wanted to have it subtle and not flashy, and that's more difficult than having something super flashy, I think.
Yeah, you were talking about the social control aspect, and I was kind of wondering, in Switzerland, are students taught about women's rights in school? Is that something they're educated about, and to what degree do you learn about?
Well, not enough, in my opinion. That's why also we made the movie. I mean, I hardly learned anything about this in school. Of course, everybody knows we didn't get the right to vote until 1971. It's like a known thing. But I don't know if the younger generation even knows that. You know, it's just something that was very much swept under the carpet because Switzerland wasn't particularly proud of that. In the end, you know, it didn't make them look very good, especially since they're claiming they're the oldest democracy. And they were not really a democracy until 1971 when everybody could vote. So, yeah, I think shockingly, people don't learn enough about this. And it's not considered important, but it is important if 50% or over 50% of your population can't vote. It is a big deal, actually. And so I had the opportunity to screen the film for a lot of young people, and that was really great, and teaching them about this and teaching them about the importance of voting. Like, I mean, a democracy doesn't exist if you don't vote, and the women had to fight very, very hard to get this right. And I think a lot of people, especially younger people, forget. They just take it for granted, they get lazy, they don't vote. women and men alike. And I think that's really dangerous. And yeah, we can see what happens if people don't vote. You know,
Right.
people go into power, and we don't want that.
Right.
Mm.
Well, you may have just said what I'm about to ask you, but I wanted to know if you had any, I mean, your film's been out a few years, but I think it's still so important to revisit now and probably for a long time. Do you have any wishes that you hope an audience takes away from watching your film? Like anything in particular, any message you would send them without spoiling it?
I think one message for me is that in the movie it becomes very clear that ultimately the battle the women fight, it's also a battle they fight for men. Like that patriarchy is not just something that keeps women in check and in some kind of corset, it also makes men's lives smaller and more one-dimensional than necessary, because we are very much, all of us, in a prison of ideas about what a man is and what a woman is, and we're so much more than these ideas. You know, we're much more three-dimensional people. We are not so much defined by our sex only. We are so much defined by, you know, all a million other things that make us who we are. And I think these ideas about what a man has to be are also very, very harmful to men, and make them, you know, make them badder partners, make them badder fathers, make them smaller as people. And so I put a lot of emphasis in a movie that it's not a battle of men against women or women against men. You know, it's very much a system. It's the patriarchy is a system of ideas, and it harms everybody. And I think that's why the husband was very important for me, and also the brother of the husband, to show how they are oppressed by the grandfather and the grandfather's idea, or their father's idea, of who they have to be as men in the world. So that's a very important takeaway for me about this movie. And I noticed I had so many Q&As all over the world, and men really responded, because it didn't just vilify them, it showed how they're also victims of the system. And a lot of men got very emotional about it and actually understood the injustice against women and how this injustice ultimately also harms them. So that's very important for me. And the other thing is the voting, that I really think voting is like, that's, if we want to live in democracies, we need to execute this right. And we can't sit back and hope for the best. We really have to go to the polls and vote. And that's really important. And it's been fought for. People have been dying for this. You know, people put their lives on the line to be able to vote. And I think, yeah, that's a very important message that I also want to convey.
Sure. Well, I think I was going to talk to you a little bit about empowerment, but everything you just said, I mean, voting and understanding that both men and women are also affected by the patriarchy that we live under and have in the past, is essentially, it sounds like the biggest message of empowerment you could give people is to empower yourself. But our theme this season is empowerment. If you have any last words about empowerment and how you see that, I'm sure we'd love to hear how you envision empowerment enacting itself today.
I mean, empowerment very much also in my movie, like one of the big scenes is also all these women coming together and in the attic of the restaurant. And I think empowerment also comes from solidarity, like really looking out for each other, being have solidarity with your sisters and brothers, care for each other. I think that's very empowering to become a group, because that's also, very much in the 50s, in this idea of the housewife alone in her room, or all of us alone in our little houses. That's also keeping us in check. And once we go outside and we are working together and we take it to the streets, like they do also, there's a demonstration and they say, we are like showing up physically, not just like being a body in the world, and protesting in the streets and all of that. I think it's very empowering, and but it's not enough. In the end, we all have to go and vote, so we can encourage each other and show what we want. in one way, but in a democracy, it's really important that in the end you go on this day to the poll and vote. That's it. That's the most important thing.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure having you, Petra, talking about your film, but more importantly, talking about what it means to work within our system and to, embrace our communities. So thanks for being here with us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me. It was fun.
Yeah. Thanks so much again to Petra for joining us today for this conversation. It was awesome. And thanks everybody out there for tuning in. If you'd like to access a virtual screening of The Divine Order, you can still check that out through the 20th on our webpage. And you can also check out the short film Tightly Wound. For more about Bullock Museum programming, you can go to thestoryofTexas.com, and you can also follow the conversation at Bullock Museum. We'll see you next time. Bye.